and welcome to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host. And again, thanks so much for being here today. Hope you are well, and I hope that you enjoyed the show today. Well, I have another terrific show. Hope you enjoy it. We're going to highlight Robert Peterpaul and his podcast, The Art of Kindness with Robert Peterpaul, which is with the Broadway Podcast Network. And I want to make sure that I get that information correct. So that's why I take a look before I say it to you. And let's welcome Robert Peterpaul here as my guest today. And Robert, good to have you.
Hi, Deborah. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad to have you. You know, you were a referral from the Broadway Podcast Network, so I'm really honored that you would take the time to be here with us today.
Oh, of course. I'm honored to be here, and I love the Broadway Podcast Network, obviously, so anybody they send my way is an immediate yes.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Why don't we update the viewer as to who you are and your background? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, viewer. I hope you're staying warm on this pretty drizzly day. I'm Robert Peterpaul. I am a writer, actor, and producer of the Art of Kindness podcast. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I moved to Connecticut to follow a girl, the love of my life, and then I fell in love with Connecticut. So I'm here now producing the podcast from my little apartment in Darien, and it's been such a fun journey.
Why don't we go back to your childhood, because you performed as an actor from a very young age, according to what I read. Tell us about what it was like growing up.
Yeah, I was really fortunate growing up because I had a really supportive family in New Jersey who would take me to auditions. I always grew up going in and out of New York City, so I was really close, and I could go in there if there was a Broadway show open call or a modeling or TV film audition. And from a young age, I started to work. So I did an off-Broadway show when I was young, which led to a small tour, which then led to booking a Broadway show. I never actually got to go on because the show closed before I could ever do that. But it was such an amazing experience to have as a child. And I feel like now, as I audition and I look back, I'm trying to get back to where I was as a kid, because when we're kids, it's all just such fun and games, right? There's no business, there's no getting in your own way by thinking you're supposed to do things a certain way. So I'm really always looking back on being an actor as a child because it was just playtime for me.
Now, are you acting presently? I know that you're in Connecticut, but do you get in the city? Are you performing now?
Yes, so with the pandemic, it's definitely been less. You know, there's not as many opportunities, but I'm self-taping a lot through my agent from home. So I get these auditions last minute, and I have to quickly try and memorize it, put it together, and then film it and send it over to them so they can give it to casting. So that's a big part of my acting journey. If you're an actor, you're pretty much a professional auditioner. And then I do a lot of theater. So I have worked a lot in the area, which is really wonderful because I can just drive over to, the Westport Country Playhouse. I've done a few shows, or the Downtown Cabaret Theater, which is a wonderful little theater in Bridgeport. So that's really nice when I can do a show in Connecticut. But right now I'm actually in Rapunzel at the Downtown Cabaret Theater, and my fiance is playing Rapunzel, which is really fun. And then I'm opposite her love interest. So that's what we're doing right now.
For the viewer that is out there, and I always ask advice, you're an actor, a writer, producer, but as an actor, how does somebody get started? You mentioned an agent, you've mentioned that you started in childhood. How does somebody get started and pursue an acting career?
Yeah, I never think of myself as someone who can give advice, and I think that's just because every journey is so different and personal. But speaking from my experience, I have seen the best way to get started is just to start. So if you want to be an actor, read plays. If you're in school, audition for your school play. Just get out there and start creating, because there really is no one set path, which I think once you realize that takes a lot of pressure off of yourself. You don't have to be going to a certain school or taking a certain class. Everybody has had a different journey. So just get started. And one way I found helpful is to look at people in the industry who are working now that you really admire. So, I feel like Meryl Streep is everybody's answer, but if you admire somebody specific to you, like I really admire Paul Rudd and the work he does, then you can kind of look at the way they got started. And again, you won't copy that, but it is a nice way to think about, oh, they did this play, maybe I'll take a monologue from that, and that would be a great audition scene for me to have. because there's so much you can just do from home to get started. So, memorize a monologue, read a play, go and read different articles about different methods, take a class. It's really just about getting started and putting yourself out there, and you'll start to form a little community of actor friends who will, help you be accountable and help you get started. And you just never know where you're gonna go and where your journey will take you.
You have mentioned a lot of theater and growing up being in theater. Is that your favorite genre to be a part of? What about film, television, commercials?
Yes, I love theater. I think there's nothing like the magic of live theater, live television. It's really having an audience that makes it special for me, because you get that direct feedback and it's almost like a mutual exchange of love, and we're all there collaborating together. Because in the theater, you really cannot do the show without an audience. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't be the same thing. You really feed off their energy. So that's what I love about the theater. But that said, I have done a lot of TV film stuff, some commercial stuff, and that's a different animal in a lot of ways, but it's all so much fun for me. And I was recently on set for a television show, which was really different in the pandemic times, I will say, but I was so grateful to be there.
Speaking of pandemic, how has that affected your work as a performer?
Pretty drastically. I think in the beginning, everybody was kind of scrambling to figure out how exactly we were going to move forward and get film and TV productions up and running, get theaters back open. And we're still figuring it out today. Like I mentioned, I was on a CBS TV show, and that's a huge network. And they kind of had it down to a science. I mean, I had to get tested 3 times before I even showed up on set. And I think even then they had a backup for me just in case I was exposed. So they've really, SAG and the union have really kind of gotten it down to a well-oiled machine. And it feels different when you're there. They used to say last looks before they would start filming, which was basically when they would come over and dab you with makeup and make sure you looked okay before they hit record. And now they say masks off. So that's a huge difference that I've pinpointed. And then with theater, the show I'm in right now, we've had to stop so many times, unfortunately, just because people have been exposed. And we just went back last night after a month off of rehearsals, and we're having a short week of catch up, and then we're opening the show. So it's a lot of the show must go on, but everything's a bit more challenging just because of the pandemic.
Well, my thoughts now, because you have come through the Broadway Podcast Network, is tell us about the podcast. What is it all about? And you said you're doing it at home and you have a studio. Tell us how that happens.
Sure. So, I think like many people in the middle of the pandemic, I was just being inundated with such negative news, and that was adding to the fatigue we all felt from just being stuck at home and not being able to see our loved ones, and the overall fear of not really knowing what was going on. So I was working as an entertainment reporter. That's always been one of my day jobs, is writing for different magazines and interviewing different actors and celebrities. And I was really dismayed seeing how those headlines were even being spun into more of a negative, salacious kind of light. And so one night in the middle of the night, the idea just kind of woke me up. I thought, the art of kindness. Oh, I could spotlight actors and people working in the arts that I love who are using their voice to do something positive and give back to the world. And from there, it just kind of spiraled. I think the next day I looked up, how do I start a podcast? I asked some friends that have podcasts. I eventually left that weekend editor job that was, taking up a lot of my time so I could start this podcast and be all in. And, it's amazing what you could do once you get a really nice microphone and have Zoom, and all these people are home a lot more now because of the pandemic, so I have access to really amazing guests. And I just kind of started, going. I hit the ground running, and it's been a real learning process ever since. But we really aim to focus on kindness and the acts of kindness that people in the entertainment industry have experienced and are doing to try and make the world a better place.
Now, let's talk just for a second, because I've had 2 Broadway actresses come on and say that they've also started podcasts during the pandemic. And you're mentioning that you are at home doing a podcast. Tell us how you created a studio in your home to do a podcast. Is it easy to do?
It's not as hard as you would think. It depends on your home environment. I mean, I live in a little apartment, so it seemed like it wouldn't be the easiest thing. But then again, I'm used to working from home, so it wasn't a huge transition for me. The most important thing, again, is having a great microphone. You know, because of the pandemic, pretty much every major podcast in the world was not able to go into a studio and was recording from home. So I think that makes audiences who are listening a lot more forgiving. If there's a little blip in the audio, we're all used to Zoom now and the kind of sound quality that provides. But B, it was also, like I said, much easier to get guests because they're home too as well. So mainly I ordered a microphone after doing research, got these little headphones. This filter's really helpful. I have a light so people can see me. I try and make it a nice vibe with my candle. And then a lot of work goes into post-production just to make sure that, you know, if my neighbor is rustling around or flushes the toilet or something, I can edit out that sound and put a filter on it to make it sound a little bit more crisp. But it's been fairly easy.
How did you get involved with the Broadway Podcast Network? They're very famous.
Yeah, they're so wonderful, and I'm such a huge fan of so many of their podcasts. And so I was getting requests once I started the show. It was so amazing to get feedback from people about how they loved it, and they were filled with so much joy listening to every episode. And so I had some people ask me if I would join their network or apply, and people were giving me different advice. And I thought, I'm going to look into the Broadway Podcast Network. So I just sent them an email with information, and then they got right back to me, and they said, let's schedule a Zoom call. And I didn't know it, but after that Zoom call, I was signed and I was in. It kind of went over my head, and I realized once I left the call, we're doing it. This is happening. So I felt very honored, and it's been so wonderful to be a part of that community.
Now you did season 1, and I found it very fascinating before we went and began our program today that you started last July of 2021, did 31 episodes. Am I correct with that?
Yes, you are. 31.
Okay, so we start season 2 on Monday, and how many do you think that you're going to do in 2022?
I'm not totally sure. It's going to be a lot more than 31 because since we're starting a full season at the top of the new year, basically, I think we'll go until the next new year and then maybe take another month off. I took a month hiatus in between. So it'll be a lot more than 31. I drop new episodes every Monday, and then sometimes we'll do a bonus episode on Thursdays. So it's hard for me to estimate a number, but I'm excited. I really love talking to guests, so the more episodes I get to do, the more fun I'm having.
To the viewer, again, who is listening about starting a podcast, how do you secure your guests?
You know, what was advantageous to me was that I've been working as an entertainment reporter, so I have access and have built relationships with a lot of publicists. But I will say, you know, depending on the guest, sometimes a DM, a direct message on Instagram is a nice way to connect. You know, just really tapping into your resources and trying to find that 6 degrees of separation, how you can connect with a person. That said, it depends on the guest. You know, my ultimate dream guest is Dolly Parton because I feel like she's just such a ball of light. She is someone who is a little bit harder to get in touch with. So, you know, it's lucky for me that I'm friends with some of these people I've had on, or I know their publicist, and that's been the awesome way. You know, I'm sure you know, publicists are kind of the gatekeeper to getting in touch with somebody when you want to have them come on your show.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought. I'm Deborah Gilbert. You are tuned into Arts and Entertainment. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Lord, I know that you are watching. When COVID came out, I was a total skeptic. I didn't take that vaccine when my husband did. Then I'm in excruciating pain. He took me to emergency. I had COVID. We don't talk about lasting effects of COVID. I still have myocarditis. It's been 65 days. This changed my thinking. Make your own choice. Make an educated one. The antidote for fear is thankfulness. I am thankful for this. I'm thankful.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
And And welcome back to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host. And again, thanks so much for taking time out. I hope you're enjoying the show. Well, we continue on with Robert Peterpaul. And Robert, why don't we talk about the foundation? I found that very interesting. What is that all about?
Oh, thank you for asking. The Thomas Peterpaul Foundation is a nonprofit that my family and I founded in honor of my brother Thomas Peterpaul, who passed away from cancer. He had ALL leukemia when I was younger growing up. In an odd twist of fate, he was diagnosed at the age of 9, passed away at the age of 11 on 9/11 at 9:11 p.m., which I just think is a weird coincidence. But, through our journey with him and just seeing the acts of kindness from the nurses and the doctors, and our community really rallied around us, we wanted to find a way to give back to other families. So we really focus on not just donating to research. We were a part of the T-cell therapy that was recently approved by the FDA, which was a really huge thing. We got to speak at Congress about that. But we also like to try and actually do things individually for the families. Let's say there's a young child with cancer who needs a babysitter because their parent is a single mom and the mom has to work to pay the medical bills and can't be there at the hospital with their child. So maybe we'll pay to have a caretaker or a babysitter. So we do little things like that to actually help the family just because we've been through it and we know that there's things that just aren't covered by foundations a lot of the time. So it's been kind of a silver lining to have that and give back to other families right now.
Well, that's wonderful that you're doing that. I know that you're probably making a positive difference in the life of everyone that you touch. So good for you.
Thank you.
Acts of kindness, that seems to be a big deal for you with the podcast as well as the foundation and probably every aspect of your life. What has that been for you like?
Kindness is love to me. It's not necessarily walking around smiling all the time, trying to be a big ball of sunshine, which I think is a beautiful attempt, but it's just striving to be kind to others and actually take the time in this busy world to really see and recognize someone. So I know acts of kindness, when I experience them, they mean the world to me. Even something as simple when I'm on I'd like to say they're runs, but they're usually walks. When I go on a walk in the middle of the day, if somebody takes a moment to look at me and smile when they walk by, I'm all the more not only ready to go smile at the next person I see and pass that on, but just filled with joy, and it really changes my whole perspective. So doing that is also, it's not why we do it, but then doing an act of kindness, it fills me up and it in turn gives me joy. So it's kind of like a ripple effect, and I just want to focus on putting that out there in this world where the focus is kind of turned to, how we can all make ourselves the best we can be, which is awesome, and fulfill our dreams. But I think a little bit of connection has gotten lost in that way. So I'm trying to just bring it back to human connection and build that bridge through kindness.
Is that why you named your podcast that? Did you want to incorporate kindness into your work?
Yes. So I find people in the arts to be some of the most empathetic people out there. The actors I know, the artists I know, who are in it for the right reasons. They just really want to connect with people and make the world better. And so I thought, there's so many people with platforms out there, famous people who are doing these wonderful things, and it's just not getting spotlighted because, the headlines are being twisted into something a little bit more salacious, like I was saying. So I wanted to do something that was all focused on kindness. So, the first question I ask on the show is, what does kindness mean to you? And from there, we go into acts of kindness people have experienced that have changed the journey of their career. And just the whole lens of the interview is really kindness and under that umbrella. So, yeah, that's why the title is The Art of Kindness. I thought it was kind of a play on words because we focus on people in the arts and it's all about kindness. And, we even play a game at the end called the Compliment Game, where I have someone in their life, a quote from them, and the guest has to guess who said it. So that's like a nice kind of gift I like to leave my guests with. But from start to finish, it's really all about kindness.
Now, as a performer and now doing the podcast, do you have time to do it all? I would think that the podcast and finding your guests is kind of almost a full-time job, and then your auditioning and your performing is probably almost a full-time job. How do you juggle it all?
Oh, Deborah, it's a lot. I don't know. Because I also have a social media marketing company that's been kind of my bread and butter day job, just because the arts can be so roller coastery and unstable. It is a lot, but I like to keep busy. I feel very fortunate that I always have something to do and a different project to tackle. I think it's all about just making sure you take the time to check in with yourself. And when something's not serving you anymore and maybe dragging you down a little bit more than lifting you up, you just have to know it's time to leave. So I'm in a place right now where everything is, hectic and busy, but I really enjoy every single thing I'm doing. And so it makes it easier and not seem like work a lot of the time.
Let's talk about auditioning. What is it like for you to do it? Are you on, you said self-tape, and then is it all technology-wise, or are you doing anything in public?
I really haven't been doing auditions in person anymore. It's all self-tapes, which I think the industry has been moving toward. Even before the pandemic, there were a lot of self-tapes. So yeah, I have a ring light, which is very helpful because I pop my phone in it and then I can just hit record. But you have to get a reader, so you have to actually have somebody that can read the scene with you, because they don't want you to, record the lines on your phone, hit play, and then read with yourself. So it's a lot of coordinating. I drag my fiance into it. She helps me, which is wonderful. But it is a lot doing everything in the place you live, I will say. You get these auditions last minute, you have to quickly set up and just hit record and then send it in. So it's definitely a learning curve, and the biggest challenge about self-taping and auditioning is getting out of your own head and standing out of your own way. So I've just been trying to approach everything with a fun light and feel, grateful that I get to do it.
Well, let's add on to that, to the viewer. How would somebody who is in the performing arts who would like to audition do what you're doing? Is there any kind of process that they need to go through to be able to submit themselves for a part in theater, film, television, you name it? What should they be doing?
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I have a wonderful agency, Take 3 Talent. So having an agent always helps, just because it's another network of people that are trying to get you auditions and submit you for things that you don't have access to as an actor. But that said, as actors, there are a ton of resources out there for us. There are websites like Casting Networks, Actors Access, Backstage, which used to be called the Ross Reports back in the day, and it was a magazine. Now that's all online. So you can make an account, you can submit yourself for auditions that you feel you fit, and that's also mostly virtual now, but there are a lot of ways just to cut your teeth and get started. So it's out there. You don't necessarily need an agent.
Speaking of that, let's talk about an agent. How does somebody secure an agent? Any advice?
The best way to secure an agent is through a referral. So if you're able to connect with a fellow actor, which is, one way to do that is by taking classes. That's an excellent way to hone your craft, but also build an artist tribe. And a lot of the times, us fellow actors, we love to help each other. So if they have an agent, they can refer you. That's always the best way to get in front of them, because agents are inundated with submissions. A lot of agencies do have submissions features on their website, so you can do a cold submission. You can mail them your headshot and resume. Sometimes people still like mail. They like the old school way versus email. And then another great way is just by taking these classes. So a lot of agents will teach classes now so they can meet new talent. And basically you'll just perform a monologue or a scene for them. They'll give you feedback, and it's just a way to connect and build a relationship. But agencies only take on a small amount of talent, and you kind of have to fit what they're looking for in a strange way. So it's tough, but just do your research, see what agency you feel like you would have a good connection and vibe with, and then submit to those, and just keep going until you get a yes.
Tell us about the podcast. Is this something that somebody should be thinking about doing? Did you find it hard to get started? Is it hard to get motivated to get up and sit in front of your microphone and do it? What's your life like when you want to be able to do a show?
Yes, it's funny that you said it becomes a full-time job before, because it really does. It's a lot of work, but it's so rewarding and so much fun. The most challenging part, I will say, is getting over the sound of your own voice. So I've had to battle with that as an actor anyway, but once I started editing these shows and listening to my voice and hearing what I was saying, which always wasn't necessarily what I was thinking, that was a tough battle and an uphill battle to get through. I'm kind of over that now, so I'll schedule interviews. I like to only do one a day, just because I've had 2 in a day before, and it's a little bit more draining when we have these long recording sessions with people. And I really like to give people my full attention and put my best foot forward and connect with these wonderful guests that are giving me their time. So we'll record with them. Once I have that recording, I edit it down so it's a bit more interesting for guests. I take out my pauses and anything that I feel is weird or awkward, which is a lot because I'm a weird, awkward person. And then I'll record the intro and the outro, edit the whole thing together, and make sure it's prepped to go on every major podcast platform. So there is a lot of setup you do have to do before you even get to that point, like get into the Apple Podcast directory, a lot of little business things. But once you're there, it's, it just becomes a routine. It's really fun, and I look forward to it every time.
Well, we've just about run out of time. Any closing thoughts for the viewer?
Well, I just want to thank you all for listening. I hope you subscribe to the Art of Kindness podcast. It's on every major platform, like I said. And we do just try and put out there positive conversations that are filled with actionable kindness tips to try and make the world a better place. And I want to thank you, Deborah, for having me. This has been so much fun.
Well, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for being here today. I'm Deborah Gilbert. You have been tuned into Arts and Entertainment. Have a super day today. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next time.